We are gathered here today in memory of Thomas, that we may free our thoughts of him as one inhabiting a physical body with the joys and the pain that life can bring. It is our goal that we may never think of him as dead, but always know him as a living soul, continuing on the pathway of eternal life in the care and keeping of our gracious and loving Creator. Later in our time together, you will have the opportunity to share remembrances, recollections, and reflections of the man you loved and still love. I have some inkling of what you will say. You will comment on his love for life, his love for the arts, his love for the camera, his love for all things Irish, his love of Latin, his love of travel, and his love for his family. You will enlarge our realization of how much his presence indeed was a gift. And the stories Maureen shared with me when we met to plan today's service, the one that most resonated with me was how Tom, as a teenager, would babysit for the kids so that Maureen could go to college. A teenage boy in New York City could truly find more exciting things to do, I have no doubt. But none more important than giving his most precious commodity, his time, to his family. That gift is all the more precious now that he is no longer with us in the bodily form. But he made many such investments in his family, whether it was running with the bulls with his nephew Paul in Pamplona or helping his niece Terry go off to college. But still, it is natural for our hearts to grieve when deprived of the daily association of one whom we love. We know the body is simply the housing of the soul. It is the loving heart and the responsive mind that we really love. And we mourn the loss of Tom's loving heart, a heart that loved his family and friends and sought to bring a little more joy and peace into the world.
What an ego. Putting up her own portrait in Aunt Geraldine's living room. I bet she didn't even ask permission.
I've told Raven you're here, Skylar. She'll be out in a minute.
Well, thank you, Geraldine.
Now, Skylar, dear, sit right down. I want to talk to you about something.
Oh, now, just a moment. Let me see if I can anticipate. You are going to remind me to be kind and generous and gentlemanly.
Something like that.
Now, Geraldine, have you ever known me not to be?
I wish you hadn't asked me that.
Now, you know that I've always been just a picture of gentlemanliness. I've always been able to maintain my... Is that someone coming around the corner?
Always have.
I went,
One cup of flour.
One and
cup of
eggs,
sugar.
yes?
Then you add the egg. Then there's nothing I can say that will dissuade you.
nope.
Yes.
Sounds like the phone.
Yes. It's for you.
Oh, thank you very much. Yes? Oh, can of corn would be fine, thank you.
ESP.
Yes, as a matter of fact, I did. It was a tough day. I was very hungry.
Well, I asked the chap at the desk if Mr. Whitney was indeed Mr. Schuyler Whitney, and he said yes. That was when I decided to come up and surprise you. But I called you first.
Yes, well, to be perfectly honest, Ian, normally I don't care much for surprises. You see, I mean, they frequently end up becoming unpleasant.
But surely not in this case.
Well, in this case, I'm especially surprised. I mean, I thought you would be home in Monticello preparing for your upcoming marriage.
I'm afraid that has been postponed.
You've postponed your wedding. Oh, come along.
Yes, it would seem that Raven's stepfather in London is rather badly off. He's fallen ill. for some extraordinary reason.
I was sure you'd say he was rather badly dying.
Take distress sale. In a recession year, you might as well call this a disaster sale.
Yeah, well, if I was going to wait for the recession to be over, I'd be quite an old man.
Well, maybe in another 12 months. 6, at least.
Try 6 days.
6 days. Sky, I won't do this. I cannot stand by and watch you lose millions to bargain hunters. I'm your business manager, remember?
Business manager, hell, you're a flunky, Spencer, and don't you forget it.
Sky, I don't think you mean that.
Oh, I mean it all right. I mean, just think about it, Spencer. I didn't hire you because of your vast knowledge of the financial world. I mean, think about it. You're a retread, Spencer. You're an ex-bodyguard. I hired you out of gratitude. Perhaps I overdid it.
Maybe you did.
Spencer, you're a servant of mine. It might do you well to remember that.
I don't have to remember it, Sky. I'm constantly reminded.
You ever been married, Gunther?
Oh, sure. Any number of times.
What?
Yes. And each experience was very enjoyable, too. And I think you'll find the same thing, sir.
Oh, no. This is my wedding. This one here. This is it. This is all. I swear I am never going to go through this again.
Mr. Whitney, I just want to say...
Oh, now, what are you going to do? You're going to give me the pre-wedding speech? Sorry. I don't want to hear that.
No,
you got a match?
nothing like that. I know it's not necessary. But I just hope that you've done the right thing.
Four B, take 1. You doing anything tonight?
Yes, you do.
Sorry, Marianne.
Kiss my toes, will you? I think it'll warm me up.
Do you want to hear the rest of this or not?
Yes, I do, but I can't listen when I'm cold.
All right, now stick your feet in between my calves.
All right.
Yo! Your feet are cold.
I told ya.
Oh, I put them in slowly. Now,
Where did you put her foot, Larkin?
on my shiatsu memory point right there. Don't do that anymore. I can't remember when you hit that point.
Never heard it called that before.
Okay.
Let's see, is this it?
Oops, where am I?
Yeah, all right, let's go.
I can't get the thing open.
Maybe I can open this. Here it is.
Listen, I heard a rumor. They need a couple people on the guiding line.
This way, shall we go? What is this odometer doing in here?
See, if that...
What is, how many?
It's just a gift. I just happened to look in the
Oh, you
drawer.
didn't happen to find that necklace, Sharon.
My name isn't Sharon.
I know your name isn't Sharon. I was thinking
This
of
is
that
pretend.
next-door neighbor over there who lives next to the Clarks. Oh,
It's
we have to
Wavin.
make believe now.
It's waving.
Look, I need your moral support. All right?
Okay. Okay, you got it.
All right. It's beautiful, man.
Here's to one wild and crazy night at Wilton College. Not Wilton College? It's not Wimbledon. Not Wilton. It's Wellington.
Gadler, I know that you're responsible for what happened last night. Probably because of this. But I just want you to know one thing. Even if I can't prove that you were behind the threats to Standing Elk or what happened at my house last night, I want you to know something. Do you know what my next line is?
No, but kiss me.
He who loses money loses much. He who loses a friend, much more. Friends, you and me, you brought another friend, and then there were three. We started our group, our circle of friends, and like that circle, there is no beginning or end. Yesterday's history, tomorrow is a mystery, today is a gift. That's why it's called the present. Like a fine wine, friendships do grow richer with age, and old friends like Larkin truly are the family that you choose. We became instant friends when I met him in 1981. He was a huge star on Edge, as you saw, and my husband, Chris Goutman, and he shared a dressing room, as well as many cocktails at the watering hole across the street. Their bond deepened when Chris started directing the show. He became entwined in our lives, Thanksgivings, birthdays, parties, trips to Nantucket with Marcia Cross, who I think everyone knows was the love of his life, London on a boys' trip with Chris, and years later, surrogate uncle to our children, Yvonne and Nick. He was family to us, and I loved him like a brother, and sometimes like a mother. Alan Coates and I were with him, sadly, on the day that he had his heart attack, doing what we always did in late September, celebrating his birthday, and another year of our special friendship. This year, our friendship was 35, but he was only 62 and way too young to leave us. When Larkin arrived at the restaurant that day, he looked like the star that he was. He was wearing a fedora, a beautiful black and white tie, carrying an antique cane, and of course, that big, beautiful smile that we all love so much. The last 2 hours of his life were spent doing what he loved the most, talking, laughing, and reminiscing with two old friends. Like all of you, I will miss him terribly, but will always cherish the memories of all the wonderful times that we had together. Thank you.
I'm Yvonne. I'm Marcia McCabe's daughter and also Christopher Goutman's daughter, and I will be speaking on his behalf. Unfortunately, he could not be here today, but he is here in spirit and with some words to say. 10 friendship quotes from my friend Larkin Malloy. 1, just remember if we get caught, I'm deaf and you don't speak English. 2, finding a friend with the same mental disorder, priceless. 3, no one will ever be as entertained by us as us. 4, yes, we're aware of how obnoxious we are when we're together. 5, yes, we know each other's faults, but we like each other anyway. 6, when I first met you, sharing the same dressing room on Edge of Night, I honestly didn't know which of us was more annoying, you with your fondness for mirrors or me with my shower cap. 7, a boat, a few beers, an endless horizon, sand in our trunks, and both of us thinking, it doesn't get any better than this. 8, let's get our Smurf on, or I'm Papa Smurf, I'm the head of a small group of little blue people that live in the forest with 99 sons and 1 daughter. Nothing weird about that. Oh no, totally normal. 9. We'll be friends forever, won't we, Pooh? Asked Piglet. Even longer, Pooh answered. 10. Chin up, chum, we got this. I wish, well, you know the rest. Love you, man. CG.
Good afternoon. My name is Alan Coates. And yeah, I was the person in the blooper who caused Larkin to roll on the floor because I forgot my lines. In any event, I'm Alan Coates, and Larkin and I have been friends for the last 35 years. We first met in New York playing characters on the daytime TV show called The Edge of Night, and our characters were part of a storyline that threw us together as rivals and competitors for the affections of Raven, our leading lady, played by the actress Sharon Gabbett. Now, I mentioned Sharon, who lives in California and is unable to be here, but she's written a tribute to Larkin, which I have been asked to read here today, a little later. Now, as soon as I started working with Larkin, I realized that he was an actor of remarkable talents. He was a compelling screen presence and one of those lucky performers who could always make hard and sometimes complicated work look easy. No mean feat considering the pressures that we were under to tape a serial on a daily basis. And I always had great admiration for that. Those days were the start of a lifelong friendship. As we both negotiated the ups and downs of life in show business, I would describe our friendship as always being just a phone call away and always supportive, not competitive. Now, just a few weeks ago, we were on the phone talking about the old days. We laughed at the thought of the conversations back then, which revolved exclusively around the women who were in our lives. Now, 35 years later, all we seem to talk about is our health. Or as we put it, the squeaks and leaks of late middle age. Now, we also developed traditions of birthdays, lunches, and many Thanksgivings with our mutual friends, Marcia McCabe and Christopher Goutman and their family. I'll always be grateful for those memories. Now, if I may, I would like to read a tribute written by the aforementioned Sharon Gabbett, who you saw on the screen, our friend from those days back in the early 80s. She's in California now, but she writes this. Larkin and I first met on the set of The Edge of Night in late 1980. I distinctly remember my first glance at him, sitting on the couch in the matriarch Geraldine Whitney's living room. I did not have a scene with him that day, but I knew he was going to be Raven Whitney's next paramour. Raven's husbands and boyfriends did not fare well on the show. A couple of them were hideously disposed of. One drove off a cliff. They were all treated horribly. Perhaps I said hi to Larkin thinking that he would just be another casualty in Raven's life. How wrong I was. Larkin Malloy, as two versions of Schuyler Whitney, would become Raven's only true love. Something that the writers had never even considered. Why? Because something happened to us, something that you cannot learn or even develop in the acting profession, something called chemistry, which only happens organically when two actors spark a supernova expression and explosion just because they're together. And now she tells a favorite story about working with Larkin, which I thought we were going to see, but she describes it here. Here's my favorite story about working with Larkin. I was in our bed, which was covered with a very slippery lead. Let me start again, forgive me. I was in our bed, which was covered with a very slippery red satin cover. Larkin was sitting on the edge of the bed as we carried on a conversation. The camera was on me, and as I was giving my line, and I watched as Larkin slipped off the satin bedspread and landed on the floor with his legs swinging in the air. Now, The Edge of Night had a very small production budget compared to the other glamorous soaps, and stopping tape for anything was a no-no. Editing costs extra money. So I continue my line, speaking to his feet. Larkin, without missing a cue, gives his line from the floor. We continue our dialogue with the camera still on me, while Larkin got back up just in time for his final tag. The final tag. The camera finally cut to him, and he delivered his line perfectly with a twinkle in his eye and that irresistible smile. The director yelled, "Cut!" as the entire studio exploded with laughter and applause. We screamed our heads off and hugged each other, and that was my Larkin. She goes on to say, we adored each other, we laughed non-stop, we cried together, I nursed him through a terrible accident, he nursed me through the death of a beloved cat. We were best friends, for real, and passionate lovers on the set. Those 4 amazing years left deep impressions within our hearts. Then we were swept apart by life. I never saw him or spoke to him after the final show in December of 1984. Who would have guessed that over 30 years later, through social media, Larkin and I were able to talk, laugh, and weep copiously on the phone as we reminisced about each other's lives and caught up. We Skyped, we texted, commented on each other's Facebook page, podcasted together, and renewed our deep love and admiration for each other. We had planned a reunion in California, but that was not to be, and I will treasure the time we had during the past 2 years together. And now that your indomitable spirit is all I have left of you, my precious love, my eyes and ears will miss you, but my heart is with you. And I'm so happy knowing that you are beyond pain and smiling that beloved Irish grin of yours in eternal peace. Sharon Gabbett. Thank you.
When I think of memories of Tom, I think back to my younger years when he babysat my brothers and I in the Bronx. He was like a much older brother to me. I remember him as a hippie with long hair and jeans, listening to Jethro Tull on his 8-track cassette tapes. I remember him asking me to teach him how to do the hustle back then because he had a date and he needed to learn how to do that. I remember him carrying me off the school bus in New York City when I had broken my arm. I was in 2nd grade, and he used to always remind me of that because he was proud that he was there for me. I remember him secretly getting one of his soap stars, one of his friends, to call me on my 16th birthday as a surprise birthday present, and it totally freaked me out. I'll never forget it. I remember him helping my mother move me to college when I was 18. I remember him coming to see me when I had a lead in a college musical, and him giving me flowers at the end of the performance with tears in his eyes. I remember him attending my college graduation and always spending holidays with us when he wasn't with his precious friends. And thank you so much for coming, by the way, because I know that means the world to him. I remember that every time that he would see us, he was such a genuine person. It was always like open arms, big smile, and it was genuine, and you could feel it. A month before he died, he asked me to call him. It was rare that we talked on the phone. In fact, it had been years since we had a lengthy phone conversation. We wound up talking twice in a four-week period. It was almost as if he knew in his soul that it would be our last conversations. He jokingly reminded me how upset I was when he helped my mother move me to college because everyone on campus recognized him as a soap star, and I'm humiliated because this is my 4 years. Like, I don't want to be known for being related to a soap star, being the, rather private person that I am. So he always had fun reminding me of that. He told me that he was so happy that I had 3 dogs. I was happily married because being a dog mom, he said, when you were a young child, you had that love for animals. He said, I'm so happy that you have them in your life now. He told me that he admired me, and he told me why. When I asked him what was going on in his life, unfortunately, it centered around his health issues, that he had just been in the hospital, and that he was just really going through a hard time. But he did say that he was getting stronger and stronger. He was going to climb a staircase every day, like escalate with the staircases to get stronger and stronger. He was going to beat it. He was really excited that he was going to move to Galway City one day. He was planning on that, and he was really excited that he was going to visit his friend Sharon and to see the redwoods. He was so excited about that. Had I known that it would have been the last conversations that I would have with him, I would have told him this: thank you for being a wonderful uncle who showed me so much love and devotion from a young child throughout my adulthood. Thanks for being there and showing up for me during the most important times in my life. He didn't have to, but he did. And I'll always remember him as a genuine, passionate, strong, determined, proud, confident, intelligent, talented, beautiful person who I admired and respected. And my husband and I went to California to a wedding, and we took some of his ashes and we dispersed it among the redwoods in his memory.
Hi, I'm Mary Esther, Tom's niece as well. These days, hardly a month goes by that I don't see a few babies born, but I'd never been present at a death. And as I drove to the hospital where my uncle Tom was on life support, I was anxious. But a peace came over me as I realized I got to be there for Tom at his death with the uncomplicated love of a niece for her uncle. And I arrived at the hospital at the exact same time as Terry and Bob. And Terry and I pretty much locked arms for the day, as cousins will do, and got to be there for our uncle as he passed. We cried, prayed, told stories, and laughed, and I got to remember my uncle. I remembered my handsome, long-haired uncle with his bell-bottoms coming from New York City, my sister and Maureen and I putting on a ballet show for him that came to a dramatic conclusion when Maureen did a tour jeté into the dog's water bowl. I remember pretending as a child for years with so much love in my heart that my super cool uncle was my big brother. And I remember the family's collective heart breaking with pride going to see Tom perform at the Arena Stage in D.C. Maureen and her family, Johnny, Grandma and Grandpa, all dressed up. I remember, of course, the fun of having, for me it was super fun, having an uncle who was a TV soap star. We moved when I was 15, and it became a easy point of entry to mention, oh, my uncle Schuyler Whitney on The Edge of Night. And Tom would welcome us backstage at the show, and that was great. I think, too, of the huge love I saw in his mother and father for him in their old age. And I think of his huge love for his mother and father. I remember his deep intelligence and eagerness to know and engage in the world. Tom had been diagnosed with emphysema. He had already struggled with his health for so long. He was facing a long, slow, difficult demise. Instead, he exited laughing with his friends. Well played, Tom. Well played. Being at my uncle's death was so sad. It was terribly painful, but it was also one of the most beautiful things in my life. He passed surrounded by a field of love, and I knew he was welcomed on the other side by a love vaster than anything we can now know. I knew that all was well. And I just wanted to read the thing I wrote the next day. Hold on. So I wrote this the next day. They're dancing a jig in the Irish section of heaven today. My dear Uncle Tom Malloy died last night, known to many as Larkin Malloy. Talented, intelligent, never gave up, greeted us always with a song in his voice. They are dancing a jig on the other side for sure. We were with him when he passed, his siblings on either side. My cousins and I were standing behind them. His friends had come through the day. It was peaceful, remarkable, sacred. Tom, we will miss you, but you are free. Thanks.
I'm Patrick Malloy. I certainly begin with thanking you, Reverend Highland, for your spirit-filled words and the hospitality of your community here in this beautiful church. I wanted to chat a bit about another aspect, and that's his Virginia family as distinct from his New York family. I want to talk about the intensity of the love and the support he received from our sister, from Pete, from their children, the support Tommy received in difficult times, the intensity of the love, He was given limitless love, as you said, Reverend. And it was truly unconditional. The affection that his family here was such a support for him. And it was just grand to hear these tales today about him. What I want to know, too, is the years that my sister really helped raise Tommy as a very, very young child. That was something that is beyond description to know what that all meant. So, Maureen and Pete and your family, thanks for everything. Thanks for everything, and the word everything is truly an understatement. Tommy thanks you. And he leaves with you his memory.
So I'm married to Patrick, so I would be Tom's sister-in-law. But my memory of Tom goes back to when he was a child, because when I married Patrick, Tommy was living at home, of course, and, he was probably about 10, I would say. And he was the bright light of my life, because there he was, this little 10-year-old. I had moved to this New York City from where I had been living, and so it was all very new to me. And of course, Patrick went off to work every day, and we were in an apartment very close to where Tom lived with his mother and father. So I became his friend. So we were two friends who would do things together. And of course, he was so smart, and he talked all the time, of course. So we just had a wonderful time and a wonderful back and forth relationship, because we lived, so close. And his mother frequently was working at a hospital nearby. So I did see him a lot, of course, and he was just so precious. You just could sit and listen to him talk. Anyway, so I just wanted to add that little tidbit, and we will miss him so much. He was sweet as could be.
I'll give this a shot. I don't think I'm gonna make it through it, but I'll try. I'm Frank. I made it this far. It's gonna be okay. I'm Tom's nephew. And I had such a hard time writing this. And I couldn't figure out why, because that's what I do. So I spoke at my mom's wedding, and my technique to get out of the crying was to break into Indian accent. Because when I was a baby, she left me in India. And so I'm not so thankful for her and her marriage, blah, blah, blah. She left me alone in a dirty place. But I can't figure out how to get that to work for this funeral thing. So the reason I had such a hard time writing this, I discovered today, is because Tom told me, he always told me all the time that I was such a great writer. So now the great writer has to write something for his funeral, and I just couldn't. Too much pressure from such a great, talented person. Tom is 8 years older than me, so he's a lot like a big brother. My parents split up. I was 8. We had to leave our nice house in Long Island, move to a lovely one-bedroom apartment in the Bronx with 3 kids. But it was great because Tom was there. And you know, I didn't really have a dad. I mean, he would come around once in a while and take us to rated R movies that he wanted to see. Bruce Lee, 5 Fingers of Death. Why is that he's playing with balls? No, they're eyeballs. Daddy, I'm scared. Can we go home? So I needed a better male influence, and there was Tom, and he was a good male influence. I remember seeing him on stage in high school. I mean, that booming voice echoing across the stage. And I saw him, he only owned 1 car, a red Mustang. Man, I can't remember the year. But it was a sweet 1960-something Mustang, and he took me riding with it, with him and his buddies, and all the windows that we rolled down, and I was too young to smoke and use the ashtray next to me. Everyone had an ashtray. But he was driving in his white T-shirt with his buddies and his nephew, driving through the Bronx in this beautiful red Mustang. I mean, he was on top of the world, we thought. Him and his friends and me, wow, look at this guy. But we didn't even know how big the world was or how great he could get, how high he could climb. I went and visited him a whole bunch of times. I would visit my old friends in New York, but stay at Tom's. I mean, he took me to Studio 54, the most exclusive club in the whole planet. Velvet ropes part for Larkin Malloy. Here comes Frank. They lock it right up. He got me in. He got me in. The greatest gift, there's so many gifts that Tom gave me. I thought I was a Mets fan, and until he taught me that I was really a Yankees fan. Because that's what real men do. He took me to see Monty Python live after teaching me about this TV show that no one knew about. Monty Python, this crazy comedy thing that I got to see him live, like row 3, because my great uncle Tom thought of me on my 13th birthday. He took me to Yankees games. Did I mention Studio 54? He took me to Ireland. We spent so much time in Ireland that when he finally saw this rare woman in short shorts walking across the street, that he drove the minivan he was driving into a trash can dumpster. And then a piece of glass flies out or something, gets me in the eye. So we're driving around Ireland looking for a hospital because there's something in my nephew's eye. There's no blood, but we need to get it checked out. So we go to the hospital, and they're like, well, you're looking for a doctor. Surely there's no doctor in the hospital. So then we had to go to the doctor's house. Anyway, he was a horrible driver, horrible. Then we returned the car in the airport, and he's like, Frank, can you do me a solid and say that you were driving? So now I have like an international accident record. No, I was only 18 years old. I know Paul he took Paul on some kind of joyride in Italy that was, I think Paul said it was scarier than Iraq war. Terrible, he only owned that one Mustang, thank God. He took me, one time we always went on beach vacations together. Grandma would chip in, Mom would chip in, Tom would chip in. We get this giant house. We'd always go to the beach. And it was something else because Tom always had a new girlfriend at the beach. So there I am sitting on this beach house, and this Miss Australia says, who wants to go shopping? Or wait, I can't do that. I can't do the accent. Who wants to go grocery shopping for the week? Huh, I'll do it. I'm Frank. Nice to meet you. So I got to go grocery shopping with Miss Australia. How else could I have done that without Tom? I remember going out to eat in New York City with Tom, and it was before he had any money, but he was starting to become famous, and you know, it's nothing worse than being famous and not rich. But we would just be, I remember eating and just leaving the restaurant, and all of a sudden, I guess it was like all the hotel employees that were cleaning the hotel had all gotten off of work at once, and they just flooded the street, and they saw Tom and I, and they just started chasing after us, and he's like screaming, literally scared. It's like 20 large maids from a hotel going, Mr. Larkin, what's going to happen in tomorrow's episode? And we're just running, hailing a cab, and I'm with him going, why am I in this place? What is going on? These are things you just never experience. He was a very good man. He was very good when his brother died in the Midwest. Tom and I flew out to collect the ashes. And of course, one of Tom's friends was there to meet us and drive us all around. And it was Gary Armagnac, another lifelong friend that Tom has. That he just collected these friends because he was such a good, generous, giving person. And perhaps the greatest gift he ever gave me, among the many, was when we would just be in a nightclub in New York, and all the girls are fawning over him, and they would say, what's going to happen? I can't wait to find out what's going to happen. And Tom turned to me and put his hand on my shoulder, and he said, well, this is Frank. He's the head writer of the show. You need to ask him. I was like, come on. I'll tell you exactly what's going to happen. So I love that guy. I'm going to miss that guy. And he was very good to me and my family, and he was good to a lot of people, and he was a bright star. And it can't be, it's been mentioned, this Facebook thing with Tom and Sharon, that Alan so eloquently spoke about. But this new Facebook thing brought them together, and Sharon is an actress, lives in California with a disabled child, and Tom is an actor that lives alone in an apartment in New York City, and somehow the internet brought them together. And there's some goofy guy, I'm sorry, I don't know who it is, but some guy has been posting their episodes of their shows every night, and Tom and Sharon were like, I don't know, Snapchatting with everybody and telling them what it was like filming that episode. And they really did come together during the last few years of their life. And all of Tom's fans got to tell him how much he loved them. They loved him. Well, he loved himself, too. Come on. But the fans loved him just as much as he did. And so the last couple of years of his life were really rejuvenated and excited through social media and all the many, many fans that he had from years and years ago that he really left a mark on them in their life and things they were going through by watching his pretend stories. So I guess I made it through this one.
I'm Maureen, Tom's third niece. And I didn't have anything written out, but I just had 3 little tidbits. My mom had 1 tidbit, I'll have 3 little tidbits. But I spoke with him on the phone for a long time, just about 2 or 3 weeks before he died. And like Terry said, where's Terry? Maybe he had some sense, but we had been communicating via email. And you know how electronic communication, it's not full communication, it's sort of half communication, and we were sort of miscommunicating. So finally he emailed me and he said, how about if we just talk on the phone like real people? And I was like, wow. So I picked up the phone, and it actually was literally like 6 phone calls back and forth before we actually connected. You know, it was not a good time, or one time he called me and told me it was not a good time. But we both persevered, and we eventually connected. And we talked for about 45 minutes. And just like you said, he was asking me, he was talking about how he was thinking about moving to Ireland, and we were talking about that. But he was asking me all about my life and the kids, and it was just very, very sweet. And just such a great reminder, like you said, to pick up the phone and call somebody. And I mean, we all rely so much on the convenience of email and text, but it's so much less human than actually being with someone, or at least talking on the phone. So that was one little tidbit. I'm just very grateful for that. My other little tidbit, Frank, you were so great about collecting stuff online after Tom died. And one of the things you let us know about was you got a note from the mother of the little girl who was Tom's daughter on the TV show. And the mom said that her little girl loved working with Tom. And she worked with all kinds of actors who never really paid attention to her or thought she was a little bit of a nuisance having a child actor on the set. But that Tom just adored her and that she loved working with him. And children, of course, are so genuine, and children know when someone is genuine. And he just loved this little girl. And I could imagine exactly what she was talking about in that letter, because as a teenage girl, he was so sweet when we moved to Connecticut, and he would invite us in frequently to come and hang out on the set of The Edge of Night or later on the other shows. But he was just so sweet to have teenage nieces hanging out on the set and introducing us to everybody. And he just had such a way of making you feel special and loved. And the last little tidbit is I admire so much his perseverance. Tom was so blessed and so gifted in so many different ways that so many of you have mentioned. But he also had some pretty tough crosses to bear. And I admire the way that he persevered. And Mother Teresa used to say, now Saint Teresa of Calcutta, used to talk about how our goal in life is faithfulness, not success. And I just really admire the way that Tom stayed faithful in his zest for life, and he really persevered, though things were not always easy. And I just admire him for that.
Let us pray. Mother and Father Presence, Spirit of life, weaving your love through and among us, comfort us in our sorrows, laugh with us in our joys. Walk with us as we find the words or make the pictures that tell the stories of our lives. Be a small, still voice in our souls that calls us to listen carefully to the living stories around us. A small, still voice in our minds that calls us to an ever greater compassion, a small, still voice in our hearts that causes us to cherish all of our lives, a small, still voice in our bodies that calls us to use our anger to build cities of hope. Mother and Father of earth and stars, we are all your children. May your love for us become our own love for all. So we pray in your many names. Amen. And now, as you're comfortable and able, I invite you to stand and join hands as we affirm the words of the prayer for protection. These we dedicate to Tom. And so with open hearts, we affirm, the light of God surrounds you. The love of God enfolds you. The power of God protects you. The presence of God watches over you. Wherever you are, God is, and all is well. And so it is.